You're connecting, you're sharing stories, you're listening.
We need to find ways of making this a regular practice of, checking in on our biases.
We would rely on informal resources like talking to people out in the community that are of influence.
Text, Men in Focus, Practitioner Reflections 4, Working with Men in Violence Prevention. Our watch acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which this video was produced. We pay our respects to all traditional owners past and present, and recognize the continuing connection Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have to land, culture, knowledge and language for over 65,000 years, and their leadership in preventing violence against women. Our watch works to prevent violence against all women. We use the word women inclusively, meaning both cisgender and transgender women. Our watch logo. Collective care, self-care and reflective practice. Participants in this video speak individually, whilst seated in a studio. A stylized image of Craig Rigney appears. Craig holds a bunch of carrots and smiles at the camera. Text, Craig Rigney, CEO, KWY Aboriginal Corporation, Cornung Wurundjeri Man.
The workforce in our sector brings with it its own uniqueness, responsibilities and trauma. So if I was to give a bit of advice, it would be to be well aware of your own values and beliefs, first and foremost. Reflect on your own life, and if there's been any trauma in that life, that you are aware of that you understand what that is, and that you can do the work in such a way that you're not negatively influencing others, but more importantly, the positive influence you have on others in this space is what we want.
A stylized image of Hala Abdelna appears. Hala is rock climbing. Text, Hala Abdelna, she, her, CEO and founder, Institute of Nonviolence.
And the training that we deliver is always centered around the well-being of the employees. Reflexive practice, so understanding the selves, our own triggers, and taking care of ourselves as well as our clients at the same time.
A stylized image of Shelley Hewson Monroe appears. Shelley stands on a surfboard and flexes her arms. Text, Shelley Hewson Monroe, she, her, Manager Prevention, Masculinities and Learning, RMIT.
There's a vulnerability that will always be there in this work. And so making sure you also work with people who you can talk that out with. Thinking about and talking about what makes you feel uncomfortable, what makes me feel uncomfortable, what kind of signs can we say, hands up, this is what I need.
A stylized image of Sarah Chong appears. Sarah smiles at the camera and an aeroplane flies over her head. Text, Sarah Chong, she, her, multicultural community leader.
You do need to go with your gut feeling sometimes, but it's very hard to sort of differentiate between your gut feeling and what is an unconscious bias.
A stylized image of Mac Cone appears. Mac sits on a weightlifting bench, surrounded by dumbbells. Text, Mac Cone, he, they, Program Coordinator, R4 Respect, YFS.
Because it is an active journey to unravel and undo and unlearn some of those things that you've been brought up with.
A stylized image of Cameron McDonald appears. Cameron sits on a rock, underneath a beach umbrella. A dolphin splashes out of the water behind him. Text, Cameron McDonald, he, him, Sector Engagement Lead, Our Watch.
I think a really important thing that men can do is that we need to find ways of making this a regular practice of, checking in on our biases.
But also find that connection to self and connection to country when you're away from the work. I'm not talking about connection to country from an Aboriginal perspective. I'm talking from a human-centred perspective, that you know how to de-stress, that you know how to look after yourself, because we need you in this space.
I always used to do a meditation. That's just a way for me to center and ground myself before I go into a 2-hour conversation about very confronting things. And I do the things that are good for me, spending time in nature, making sure I take time off, and having breaks and keeping myself nourished, trying to eat healthy, try to exercise.
Text, Important considerations for working with men. What in a trauma-informed way?
Everything we do when working with men has to have a deeply embedded trauma lens to it.
A stylized image of Cassie Lindsay appears. She stands next to a volleyball net, with a ball at her feet. Text, Cassie Lindsay, she, her, co-founder, Red Consulting and Training.
There will be people in there who are impacted by violence or people around them that have been impacted by that.
Understanding that everybody needs healing and recovery, that everybody has a story.
Some people will walk out of the room, some people will try and distract the rest of the room. And it's understanding, okay, this is not trying to make fun of what we're talking about. This is something that's going on within this young person's life that they're uncomfortable with.
What might look like aggression or confusion or resistance might be anxiety, might be fear.
Often men would say to me, I'm thinking about the man box and I can actually see myself in that. And for them, that can be quite confronting.
In working with migrant and refugee populations, their journey to settlement has been quite conflicted with many challenges. Some person may be triggered to a lot of bright light or to certain spaces or to certain people, so we would look to avoid that as much as possible. We would also work very closely alongside other specialist services such as Foundation House.
Text. Important considerations for working with men. Be aware of collusion.
Collusion happens every second of every hour, and you'll never be great at it, but you need to be so on your game about it.
Collusion can be because I'm trying to keep myself safe. I might not feel safe enough to challenge someone. It might be because I haven't addressed my own internalized misogyny or racism or whatever it is. So I'm colluding out of ignorance or active overt biases. And collusion can happen because I'm using it to build rapport to get to another outcome. And that's the art of facilitating conversations in this space.
One of the biggest areas where people fall down is body language. As a practitioner, listening to a man disclose his use of violence against women, if I'm nodding my head, what message is that telling him? Now, I'm nodding my head to say, yes, keep talking. To him, he may be thinking he agrees with me. Yes, he understands why I use violence.
There's this tipping point in engagement that goes from really connecting with a human to tipping over into collusion, because you're connecting, you're sharing stories, you're listening, and then suddenly you realised, I missed that point back there. And it takes a lot of practice, and then you can still get it wrong next time. Because you actually need to talk it out with much more experienced people or people who do the work often to be able to find a way back.
Text. Resources and tools.
The Men in Focus practice guide has a really helpful checklist for people to reflect on what areas of practice they might already be strong in, and then offers reflection for other areas where they might want to develop their practice further.
A stylized image of Natalie Russell appears. Natalie holds a guitar and smiles at the camera. Text. Natalie Russell. She. Her. Sector Engagement Lead. Our Watch.
The Vic Health Framing Gender Equality and Framing Masculinity message guides really lay out values-based messaging to ensure that the framing that we use can then support the groups of men and boys that we work with to take on board our progressive ideas around transforming masculine stereotypes.
The practice guide also has a series of practitioner vignettes, which are just really nice reflections from people doing the work. And people really enjoy hearing from other people because there's quite a few shared struggles, in hearing about that from other practitioners can be really validating, but it can also sometimes offer some helpful tips and helpful strategies.
Some of the work that's being done by Jesuit Social Services around the man box to explain masculine behaviours, and actually I think we would rely on informal resources like talking to people out in the community that are of influence.
A stylized image of Jackson Fairchild appears. Jackson stands beside a garden and peers at the flowers. Text. Jackson Fairchild, they them primary prevention leader.
We provide resources for both trans women and trans feminine people, and for cis men and their friends and families that's focus on speaking to the things that they really value, that they're really connected to.
A stylized image of Shane Tass appears. Shane holds a tennis racket and ball. He serves the ball. Text. Shane Tass, he, him, principal advisor, masculinities, Our Watch.
The work that Rainbow Health has done in this area is really important through their work Pride and Prevention, which is a suite of resources. But in particular, their evidence review really sets up what drives violence against LGBTIQA+ people. The Working Together with Men model gives some really great tips around how to maintain accountability to women.
Just watching other people can teach you so much. And I'd say just look for as many free webinars as you can find. go to a conference at least once a year or something like that, so that you can just hear from others in the sector, expand your network, and possibly find a mentor.
I am shameless in engaging with the prevention sector. I email people I've never met. I also know that I never ever say no to an email from someone reaching out. The person that most inspires you, reach out to them.
Text. Be prepared and be courageous.
Because at the end of the day, we're trying to do two things. We're trying to end violence against women and children, and at the same time, we want to increase the safety to women and children. So you have to know what you're doing. You have to be a good practitioner. You have to be well trained. You have to be well supported.
But also at the heart of it is be really excited to go do this work. You get to sit there and unfold with people and transform with people. So there's also a lot of excitement there.
Text. Supports available. 1-800-RESPECT. National Sexual Assault, Domestic Family Violence Counselling Service. 1-800-737-732. Men's Referral Service. Operated by No to Violence. 1300-766-491. Australian Human Rights Commission. 1300-656-419. 13 Yarn. 1392-76. Sane. We're people like you. 1-800-187-263. Q Life. 1-800-184-527. This video is a part of a suite of Men in Focus practice resources produced by Our Watch and supported by the Australian Government Department of Social Services. Visit ourwatch.org.au. Our Watch. Preventing violence against women.